Evra lay strapped to the examination table, her heart pounded in her chest. The harsh white lights of the lab glared down at her, making her squint. She could hear the clicking and whirring of the machines around her and feel the cold air on her exposed skin. Evra was no stranger to this room. For months now, the Cryans had been subjecting her to their cruel experiments, poking and prodding her body, injecting her with strange substances that made her veins burn. They were fascinated by her humanoid physiology, so similar to their own yet so different. Evra was one of the last of her kind, a peaceful race of forest dwellers who lived in harmony with nature on the planet Allia. When the technologically advanced Cryans invaded, her people stood no chance. Most were slaughtered. The rest rounded up for the Cryans' twisted scientific pursuits. Now here she was, alone and afraid, waiting for the next round of torment to begin. Tears leaked from the corners of her eyes as she thought of her family, her friends, her entire world, all gone. The grief threatened to swallow her whole. The door to the lab slid open with a hiss, and Evra tensed, bracing herself. 2 Cryan scientists entered, their gray skin and cold black eyes sending a shiver down her spine. They looked at her dispassionately, as if she was nothing more than a specimen to be studied. Subject Z1 appears to be in good physical condition, one of them said clinically, consulting a data pad. Vital signs are stable. We can proceed with the next phase of testing. Excellent, the other replied, picking up a gleaming scalpel from a tray of instruments. I'm eager to get a look at its neurological structure. The brain scans have been intriguing. Evra whimpered as he approached, the scalpel flashing under the bright lights. She squeezed her eyes shut, sending a desperate prayer to whatever gods might be listening. Suddenly, a loud boom rocked the lab, making the Cryans stumble. Red emergency lights began flashing and an alarm blared. Evra's eyes flew open, her heart leaping into her throat. What was happening? Shouts and the sounds of weapons fire echoed from beyond the lab door. The Cryans looked at each other in alarm. We're under attack, one of them said. Quick, activate the emergency protocols. He never got to finish his sentence. The lab door exploded inward, knocked right off its tracks. Through the smoking hole stepped a tall, broad-shouldered figure wearing strange black armor, a large gun gripped in his hands. Evra blinked in shock. It was a human male, like the one she had heard about in the old stories. His chiseled face was set in grim determination, his blue eyes hard as steel. The Cryans recovered from their surprise and reached for their own weapons, but they were too slow. The human fired twice and they crumpled to the floor, dark blood pooling beneath their bodies. Evra lay frozen, hardly daring to breathe, as the human approached her table. Was he here to rescue her, or did he have more nefarious intentions? She had no way of knowing. He looked down at her, his expression unreadable. Then slowly, almost gently, he reached out and began undoing the straps that held her down. It's okay, he said in a deep, rumbling voice. I'm not going to hurt you. I'm here to get you out of this hellhole. Evra stared up at him in wonder and disbelief as he freed her from her bonds. 1,000 questions raced through her mind, but she couldn't find her voice. He helped her to her feet and steadied her as she swayed, her legs weak from disuse. She clutched at his armored chest, tears of relief spilling down her cheeks. Thank you, she managed to whisper. Thank you for saving me. The corner of his mouth quirked up in a small smile. Thank me later, sweetheart. We're not out of the woods yet. Now come on, let's blow this joint. He took her hand and together they ran out of the lab, leaving the bodies of her tormentors cooling on the floor behind them. Evra's heart pounded with wild, desperate hope. Maybe, just maybe, this strange human warrior was the key to her salvation. Maybe he could help her find a new home, a new purpose. For the first time in a long time, Evra dared to dream of a future beyond pain and despair. Hand in hand with her rescuer, she raced toward the promise of freedom. Evra and her human rescuer sped through the twisting corridors of the Cryan research facility, alarms blaring all around them. The human male moved with a fluid grace and power that Evra couldn't help but admire, his armored boots pounding against the metal floor. She struggled to keep up, her bare feet slapping against the cold ground, her lungs burning with exertion. It had been so long since she'd been allowed to move freely, her muscles weak and atrophied from months of confinement. The human glanced back at her, his blue eyes filled with concern. "You holding up okay back there?" Evra nodded, gritting her teeth in determination. She wouldn't let her weakness slow them down, not when freedom was so close she could taste it. Suddenly, a group of Cryan soldiers rounded the corner ahead of them, their energy weapons raised. The human cursed under his breath and shoved Evra behind him, shielding her with his broad back. "Stay down," he ordered, his voice hard as granite. Evra crouched low, her heart in her throat as the soldiers opened fire. Searing bolts of plasma streaked through the air, but the human was already moving. He dove to the side, rolling smoothly to his feet and returning fire with his own massive gun. The weapon roared like an angry beast, spitting out a hail of projectiles that tore through the Cryan soldiers like they were made of paper. Blood and gore splattered the walls as they fell, their dying screams echoing off the metal bulkheads. In a matter of seconds, it was over. The human straightened up, the barrel of his gun smoking. He turned to Evra, his expression grim. "We need to keep moving. There'll be more where they came from." Evra swallowed hard and nodded, trying not to look at the mangled corpses littering the floor. She had never seen such violence, such brutality. It both terrified and thrilled her in a way she didn't quite understand. They took off running again, the human leading the way he navigated with unerring precision. It was clear he had memorized the layout of the facility. Evra's lungs burned and her legs ached, but she pushed herself harder, determined not to fall behind. At last they reached a massive hangar bay filled with sleek Cryan spacecraft. The human headed straight for a small, nondescript shuttle near the back of the bay. "That's our ride out of here," he said, punching a code into the shuttle's access panel. The hatch slid open with a hiss, and he ushered Evra inside. The interior of the shuttle was cramped and utilitarian, with barely enough room for the two of them. The human slid into the pilot's seat and began flipping switches and pressing buttons with practiced ease. Evra strapped herself into the co-pilot's chair, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. She was really doing this. She was really escaping. The shuttle engines roared to life and they lifted off, shooting out of the hangar bay and into the inky blackness of space. Evra watched in awe as the research facility receded behind them, growing smaller and smaller until it was nothing more than a speck against the stars. She turned to the human, tears welling up in her eyes. I don't know how to thank you," she whispered. "You saved my life." He glanced at her, his blue eyes softening just a fraction. "No need to thank me. I was just doing my job." "Your job?" Evra asked, curiosity getting the better of her. "What exactly is it that you do?" The human's jaw tightened and he looked away, his gaze focusing on the endless expanse of space ahead of them. "I'm a soldier," he said after a long moment, "a warrior. I fight to protect the innocent, to bring justice to the guilty. It's all I know." Evra studied his profile, taking in the hard lines of his face and the stubble shadowing his jaw. He looked tired, she realized, tired and haunted, as if he carried the weight of 1,000 battles on his broad shoulders. "Do you have a name, soldier?" she asked softly. He glanced at her, a wry smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Raze," he said. "Sergeant Raze Novak, United Systems Marine Corps." "Raze," Evra repeated, liking the way it felt on her tongue. "I'm Evra Talene." "Well, Evra Talene," Raze said, his smile widening just a fraction. "Looks like you and I are going to be spending some quality time together. Hope you're ready for an adventure." Evra felt an answering smile spread across her face, the first real smile she'd worn in longer than she could remember. "With you by my side, Raze," she said, "I think I'm ready for anything." As the shuttle streaked through the stars, carrying them toward an uncertain future, Evra felt a flicker of something she hadn't felt in a very long time: hope. The shuttle drifted through the endless expanse of space, the stars streaking by like glittering diamonds against the inky blackness. Evra sat in the co-pilot's seat, watching Raze as he piloted the craft with a sure, steady hand. They had been traveling for hours now, putting as much distance as possible between themselves and the Cryan research facility. Evra's mind was still reeling from everything that had happened, from the sudden violent end to her captivity, to the shocking realization that she was now free. Free. The word felt strange and unfamiliar on her tongue, like a language she'd forgotten how to speak. What did it even mean to be free? She had been a prisoner for so long, first of the Cryans and then of her own despair, that she wasn't sure she knew how to be anything else. Raze glanced over at her, his blue eyes searching her face. "You doing okay over there? You're awfully quiet." Evra shrugged, trying to find the words to express the tumult of emotion swirling inside her. I don't know," she admitted. "This all feels so surreal. Like a dream, I'm afraid I'll wake up from it any moment." Raze's expression softened with understanding. "I know the feeling," he said quietly. "When you've been through hell, it's hard to believe that anything good can be real. But trust me, Evra, this is real. You're safe now." Evra swallowed hard, tears pricking at the corners of her eyes. "Am I?" she whispered. "The Cryans took everything from me. My home, my family, my whole world. I don't know where to go from here." Raze reached out and took her hand, his calloused fingers warm and reassuring against her skin. "Hey," he said softly, "you're not alone anymore, okay? I'm here, and I promise I'm going to do everything in my power to help you find your way." Evra looked up at him, her heart swelling with a sudden, fierce rush of emotion. In that moment, she knew with a bone-deep certainty that she could trust this man, this human warrior who had risked everything to save her. She squeezed his hand, a small smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. "Thank you, Raze, for everything." He grinned at her, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Anytime, sweetheart. Now, what do you say we find some grub? I don't know about you, but I'm starving." Evra's stomach rumbled at the mention of food, reminding her that it had been a long time since her last meal. "That sounds amazing," she said fervently. Raze chuckled and unstrapped himself from the pilot's seat, stretching his muscular arms over his head. "I think I saw some ration packs in the back. They're not exactly gourmet, but they'll do in a pinch." He rummaged through a storage compartment and came up with 2 silver packets, tossing one to Evra. She caught it and tore it open, her mouth watering at the sight of the dehydrated protein squares inside. They ate in companionable silence, the only sound the soft hum of the shuttle's engines. Evra found herself sneaking glances at Raze as he ate, admiring the strong lines of his jaw, the way his black hair fell across his forehead. He was unlike any man she'd ever known, so fierce and powerful, yet so gentle and kind. She felt drawn to him in a way she couldn't quite explain, as if some invisible force was pulling her toward him like a magnet. As if sensing her gaze, Raze looked up and met her eyes, a slow, wicked smile spreading across his face. "See something you like, sweetheart?" Evra blushed furiously, caught off guard by his boldness. I was just thinking," she stammered, "about what comes next. Where do we go from here?" Raze leaned back in his seat, his expression turning serious. "Well, that depends on you," he said. "What do you want, Evra? What are you hoping to find out there among the stars?" Evra bit her lip, considering the question. What did she want? Evra had been so focused on survival for so long that she had never really allowed herself to think about the future. But now, with Raze by her side and the whole universe at her fingertips, she felt a flicker of something she had thought long dead. Desire. A yearning for something more than mere existence, for a life filled with purpose and meaning, and maybe even love. I want to find a new home," she said slowly, the words feeling strange and wonderful on her tongue. "A place where I can belong, where I can be more than just a survivor or a victim, where I can be happy." Raze's eyes shone with a fierce, proud light. "Then that's exactly what we'll do," he said, his voice ringing with conviction. "We'll find you a new home, Evra. I promise you that. And until we do, you've got me. I'll be your home for as long as you need me." Evra's heart swelled with a sudden, overwhelming rush of emotion. She reached out and took his hand, twining her fingers with his. "I think I'd like that very much, Raze Novak," she whispered. "Very much indeed." As the shuttle carried them onwards through the endless expanse of space, Evra felt a sense of peace settle over her. A certainty that whatever lay ahead, she would face it with Raze by her side. Together they could overcome anything. Together they could find a way to heal, to hope, to dream. Together they could find a way to live again. Suddenly the shuttle shuddered and jolted, alarms blaring as Raze fought to keep the craft under control. Evra gripped the edges of her seat, her heart pounding in her chest as she watched the readouts on the control panel flash red. "What's happening?" she cried, her voice nearly drowned out by the cacophony of noise. Raze gritted his teeth, his hands flying over the controls. "We're caught in some kind of gravitational anomaly," he said tightly. "It's pulling us off course." Evra swallowed hard, fear clawing at her throat. They had been traveling for days now, following the coordinates Raze had programmed into the shuttle's navigational system. He had told her he was taking her somewhere safe, somewhere the Cryans would never find her. But now, as the shuttle bucked and shuddered around them, Evra couldn't help but wonder if they would even make it that far. Suddenly, the shuttle gave a sickening lurch and the engines cut out, plunging them into an eerie silence. Evra's stomach dropped as she realized they were drifting, powerless in the vast emptiness of space. Raze slammed his fist against the control panel, cursing under his breath. "Damn it! The anomaly must have fried our systems." Evra felt a cold knot of fear settle in her gut. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice small and frightened. Raze turned to her, his blue eyes fierce and determined. "We survive," he said simply. "We find a way to get this bucket of bolts up and running again, and we keep going. I'm not giving up on you, Evra. Not now, not ever." Evra felt a sudden rush of warmth flood through her at his words, chasing away the chill of fear. She reached out and took his hand, squeezing it tightly. "I know you won't," she whispered. "I trust you, Raze, with my life." He smiled at her, a soft, tender thing that made her heart skip a beat. "I won't let you down, sweetheart. I promise." They spent the next few hours working on the shuttle systems, Raze's skilled hands coaxing life back into the damaged engines. Evra did her best to help, handing him tools and following his instructions as best she could. As they worked, they talked, sharing stories of their pasts and their hopes for the future. "You know, back on Allia, we didn't have anything like this," Evra said, gesturing to the shuttle's complex systems. "We lived a simple life, close to the land. Everything we needed, the forest provided." Raze glanced up at her, his eyes curious. "What was it like?" he asked. "Your world, I mean." Evra smiled, her gaze turning distant and dreamy. "It was beautiful," she said softly. "The trees were so tall they seemed to touch the sky, and the streams were so clear and cold you could drink straight from them. We lived in harmony with nature, taking only what we needed and giving back in return." Raze nodded, a look of longing passing over his face. "Sounds peaceful," he said, "not like where I come from." "What was your world like?" Evra asked, handing him a wrench. Raze sighed, his shoulders tensing. "It was different," he said. "All towering cities and gleaming spires, technology and progress as far as the eye could see. Don't get me wrong, it had its beauty, but sometimes it felt cold, impersonal, like everything was moving too fast, and if you couldn't keep up, you get left behind." Evra laid a hand on his arm, her touch gentle. "Is that why you became a Marine?" she asked softly. "To find a place to belong?" Raze met her gaze, his eyes haunted. "Partly," he admitted, "but mostly I wanted to make a difference, to protect the innocent, to fight for what's right. I've seen so much darkness out there, Evra, so much cruelty and injustice. I guess I just wanted to be a light in all that darkness," Raze admitted, his voice soft. "You are," Evra said fiercely, her hand tightening on his arm. "Raze, you saved me. You risked everything to get me out of that place, to give me a chance at a new life. That's no small thing." Raze's face softened, his eyes warming. "I'd do it again in a heartbeat," he said quietly. "For you, Evra, I'd do anything." Evra's heart stuttered in her chest, her breath catching. "Raze," she whispered, her voice trembling. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," he murmured. a slow, tender smile spreading across his face. "Just know that I'm here, and I'll always be here, for as long as you need me." Evra swallowed hard, tears pricking at the corners of her eyes. "I think I'm going to need you for a very long time," she whispered. Raze's smile widened, his hand coming up to cup her cheek. "Then it's a good thing we've got all the time in the world," he said softly. As they sat there, lost in each other's eyes, the shuttle humming around them, Evra felt a sense of peace wash over her. She was certain that whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. Through it all, Evra found herself drawn ever closer to Raze, captivated by his strength and courage, by the fierce, unwavering loyalty that burned in his eyes. When at last the engine roared to life, the shuttle shuddering as it broke free of the anomaly's grip, Evra couldn't help but let out a whoop of joy. Raze grinned at her, his face streaked with sweat and grime, and in that moment she thought he had never looked more beautiful. They set course for the coordinates once more, the stars streaking by outside the view screen. Evra sat back in her seat, a sense of peace settling over her. Whatever lay ahead, she knew she could face it with Raze by her side. Hours turned into days as they traveled, the shuttle carrying them ever deeper into uncharted space. Evra found herself growing more and more comfortable in Raze's presence, the easy camaraderie between them blossoming into something deeper, something that made her heart race and her skin tingle. She caught him watching her sometimes, his blue eyes intense and heated, and she felt a thrill of excitement run through her. She knew he felt it too, this crackling electric thing between them, but he held himself back, ever the gentleman. Until one night, as they sat together in the shuttle's small galley, sharing a meal of rehydrated rations, Evra looked up to find Raze staring at her, his gaze so fierce and hungry it took her breath away. Slowly, deliberately, he reached out and brushed a strand of hair from her face, his fingers lingering on her cheek. Evra's heart stuttered in her chest, her skin burning where he touched her. "Evra," he murmured, his voice low and rough. I want..." Before he could finish, the shuttle's alarms blared to life once more, warning lights flashing on the control panel. Raze cursed and leapt to his feet, racing towards the cockpit with Evra hot on his heels. They stared out the view screen in horror at the sight that greeted them. A massive Cryan warship looming out of the darkness like a monstrous beast. Evra felt her blood run cold, fear clutching at her heart. They had found her, even here in the depths of space. She could not escape them. Raze's jaw clenched, his eyes hard as flint. "Strap in," he ordered, his voice brooking no argument. "Things are about to get bumpy." As the warship opened fire, the shuttle bucking and shuddering under the onslaught, Evra could only pray that Raze's skill and courage would be enough to see them through. If they fell now, if the Cryans captured her once more, she knew there would be no escape, no rescue, only an eternity of pain and despair with no hope of ever being free again. The shuttle shook and shuddered, sparks flying from the control panel as the Cryan warship's lasers slammed into their shields. Evra gripped the edges of her seat, her heart pounding in her throat as she watched Raze wrestle with the controls, his face set in a mask of grim determination. "Raze!" she cried, her voice nearly lost in the cacophony of alarms and explosions. "What do we do?" He glanced over at her, his blue eyes fierce and unwavering. "We fight," he said simply. "We give these bastards hell, and we don't stop until we're dead or they are." Evra swallowed hard, fear and adrenaline coursing through her veins. She knew Raze was right. Surrender was not an option. The Cryans would show no mercy, not after what she had done, what they had done together. Raze's hands flew over the controls, the shuttle banking and weaving as he tried to evade the warship's relentless pursuit. But it was no use. The Cryan vessel was too fast, too powerful. They were outgunned and outmatched in every way. Suddenly, the shuttle gave a sickening lurch, alarms blaring as the engine sputtered and died. Evra's stomach dropped, dread clawing at her heart. They were dead in the water, helpless and adrift. Raze slammed his fists against the control panel, a string of curses falling from his lips. "Damn it," he snarled, They must have hit our power core. Evra reached out and took his hand, her fingers trembling against his. Raze, she whispered, her voice breaking. I'm sorry for everything. I never meant for you to get caught up in all this, to risk your life for me. He turned to her, his eyes softening. Hey, he said gently, reaching up to cup her face in his hands. Don't you dare apologize. Meeting you, fighting for you, it's the best damn thing that's ever happened to me. And if this is the end, then there's no one I'd rather face it with than you. Evra let out a sob, tears streaming down her face as she surged forward, capturing his lips in a desperate, searing kiss. Raze groaned against her mouth, his arms coming around her, holding her close as the shuttle shook and shuddered around them. They clung to each other as the Cryan warship loomed ever closer, its shadow falling over them like a shroud. Evra closed her eyes, bracing herself for the end, for the searing heat of the lasers that would tear them apart. But the end never came. Instead, the comm system crackled to life, a familiar voice filling the cockpit. Raze, you son of a... Thought you could start the party without us? Evra's eyes flew open, hope surging through her like a wildfire. She knew that voice. She had heard it 1,000 times in Raze's stories. It was Jet, Raze's commander, his brother in arms. Raze let out a whoop of joy, his face splitting into a grin. Jet, he cried, you beautiful bastard, I've never been so happy to hear your ugly mug. Jet's laughter filled the comm. Sit tight, buddy, the cavalry's here. And then, like a miracle, a fleet of human ships appeared on the horizon, their lasers cutting through the darkness like the blazing swords of avenging angels. They fell upon the Cryan warship like wolves, tearing into its hull with a ferocity that took Evra's breath away. The battle was short and brutal, the human ships moving with a precision and skill that spoke of years of training and experience. In a matter of minutes, the Cryan vessel was nothing more than a smoking ruin, its crew scattered to the stars. Evra let out a breathless laugh, tears of relief streaming down her face. She turned to Raze, her heart so full she thought it might burst. You did it, she whispered. You saved us. Raze grinned at her, his eyes shining with love and pride. We did it, he corrected gently. You and me, Evra. We're a team now, always and forever. As the human ship surrounded them, as Jet's voice filled the comm with whoops of victory and relief, Evra knew he was right. They had found each other across the vast expanse of space, two broken souls searching for a place to belong. And in each other they had found that place, a home, a family, a love that would endure through whatever trials and challenges the universe threw their way. Evra leaned forward, resting her forehead against Raze's. I love you, she whispered, the words feeling like the most natural thing in the world. I love you, Raze Novak, with all my heart and soul. Raze's smile was blinding, his eyes shining with unshed tears. I love you too, Evra Telene, he murmured, more than life itself. And I promise, from this day forward, I will always be by your side, no matter what. As the shuttle docked with Jet's ship, as they stepped out into a future bright with promise and hope, Evra knew that she had finally found her place in the universe, a place of love and laughter, of courage and strength, a place where she could heal, where she could grow, where she could become the woman she was always meant to be, a place called home. This concludes our thrilling escape from the Cryan warship. If this story of unexpected heroism and finding a place to belong moved you, show your support by leaving a like. Comment with the word home if you believe in the power of finding where you truly belong. And don't forget to subscribe if you love tales of courage and adventure. Your engagement fuels our passion to bring you more stories like this. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey.